as important as diabetes. In fact, if there is an epidemic of diabetes, there is also an epidemic of obesity, a twin epidemic called diabesity. And therefore it's very important that we address both. All the new treatments which are being recommended for diabetes today are aiming at weight loss. Any treatment which does not lead to weight loss is not good enough. Therefore, weight is becoming at the center of diabetes treatment. Not only for diabetes, not only for metabolism, but also for heart, as Dr. Vivek would decipher for us in his talk. So over to a wonderful endocrinologist, a gentleman endocrinologist, Dr. Saptarshi Bhattacharya, our friend, to take the CME forward and to give us some pearls of wisdom for carrying home some important points so that we can execute them in our practice. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chauhan. So, I think you have set the right context, not that we need to understand that obesity is also a chronic disease. So, we had long been thinking that, okay, somebody is obese, so even there was some inertia on part of the doctor as well as on the part of the person who is having obesity. And part of the inertia came from the fact that nothing much could be done about it. So you had diet and lifestyle changes which still remain cornerstone of any chronic disease, metabolic disorder, chronic metabolic disorder like obesity or diabetes. So that is, we cannot take away the importance of that. But again, that is a difficult thing to sustain, and some people do get frustrated that, and we have patients in our chambers who will come and tell that, okay, I have been trying to do everything, but I have not been able to lose weight. Be it a person with diabetes, be it a person without diabetes. So these are things which were there. So we knew that obesity increases the risk of multiple complications. So if diabetes will increase the mortality rate and morbidity rates, and hypertension will also increase mortality and morbidity rate. So we never think that, okay, if somebody is having diabetes or if somebody is having hypertension, we need to treat that. But for obesity, it was always a challenge, and part of the challenge came from the fact that we couldn't do much about it in terms of treatment. So we tried to reinforce lifestyle changes again and again, but again, that is something which even if it started, it's difficult to maintain, and there was almost always a roadblock which led to frustration from the part of the person concerned as well as from the part of the doctor. So we have important medicines which have come up. We have been using some of them. So the GLP-1 agonist came around in 2006-2007, and it has gone through a lot of evolution. One of the challenges that has been there with GLP-1 agonists was that in spite of its multiple benefits, so we started having severe benefits from agents like liraglutide and also dulaglutide. So we knew that they improve cardiovascular outcome. But in spite of that, since these were injectables, there was some inertia on part of the person concerned, and many people will still tell, no, I don't want to use an injectable. So we have this novel molecule called oral version of semaglutide, which is commercially named as Rybelsus. So that is an important breakthrough. So it's a large protein molecule. We know that whenever you ingest a protein molecule, so that gets digested. So anyone, which is the only other protein molecule you will take in orally? That's a quiz question. So I am a chairperson, so even if you ask me difficult questions today, so I will divert into these figures. But for today, so I get to ask you a question that any other protein molecule which we can take in orally and that is used medicinally.
Or for glucagon.
So that is coming up. That is again stage 3. So just ADA presented the stage 3 data earlier. That was stage 2.
Recently, yeah.
But so something which you have all used, that is approved.
Okay, Rybelsus.
No, Rybelsus is there. So other than that, see, challenges with protein molecule will be that these are like polypeptides. So they will get broken down.
You said oral molecule.
Oral molecule, amino acid sequence, not very large, but used orally, and that works.
Injectables are in the pipeline.
Orally, everybody has used it almost.
Injectable?
It's an amino acid, not very large, but it's a small polypeptide. You can say.
Some glucuron, something like that.
See, you have the newer molecules which are coming up.
Yeah.
But I am not. That is an approved molecule available in
Only
market.
approved molecule is the ribosys, oral.
Not related to diabetes. It's a quiz question.
Okay.
So most of the
एक मिनट, let him say.
most of the protein molecules. See, challenge with ribosys is that so it's a protein molecule. So any protein you take in will get broken down into amino acids, and that's how they will get absorbed. So, but if one of the protein molecules, small protein, let's say just amino acid polypeptide, around 8-9 amino.
It's a peptide.
It's a peptide.
Small molecule peptide.
So small molecule peptide, you have been using it for more than 10-15 years. It's there in the Indian market.
More than 10, 15 years.
So that is desmopressin.
Desmopressin, okay.
So that is something which is a polypeptide. So but again it gets absorbed orally. But this is a unique protein molecule. It's a larger protein molecule, and it's combined with snack, and that is how there are some precautions. Again, I will not go through all of this. So we know that diabetes is there, and the incidence is increasing globally. In India, we also have a huge amount of diabetes. So my job is to welcome these two speakers primarily and to understand how diabetes, obesity and CVD are closely interlinked, and how we can have newer choices of medicines like oral version of semaglutide and ribosys. So initially there was some confusion. So when I think I had come last time, so I got a question. This does not have CV outcome data. So do you recommend it for CV cardiovascular person who is having a past history of CAD or having a past history of ACS? So will you still use it? But again, so this is we have newer data coming up where it has shown that it's really superior, and that is something which is expected. That was in a dedicated CV outcome trial, and so we will have these discussions later on. So I am not going to go into this. So it has multiple targets. So we need to. So maybe 15 years back, somebody would have told, okay, you are on sulfonylurea, metformin and 5-metazone. You have already taken 3 OHs, or maybe sulfonylurea, metformin and a gliptin. You have taken 3 OHs, the A1C is 8. So you need to give in, and past history of cardiovascular disease. So you should shift to insulin. Now the approach is that, okay, you are on sulfonylurea, metformin and gliptin, A1C is 7.8 or 8, and you have a past history of cardiovascular disease. So now you should not shift to insulin, but you should shift to a GLP-1 analog, because that is something which has proven CV protection. So that is something which has changed. So there are benefits in terms of macrovascular and microvascular outcomes, and we all know that weight reduction will improve diabetes control. It leads to diabetes remission. So this So again, so we know that we need to lose body weight. So this is all closely interlinked. So earlier we had challenges that more. So we had presentations where it was said that okay, if somebody's HbA1c goes up, the weight will also go up. If the HbA1c gets controlled with tighter glycemic control, the weight tends to go up. So that again has changed. So we have medicines which can ensure that even if the HbA1c is going up, we won't have an increase in weight gain, all thanks to these newer molecules, partly GLP-1 analogs, to some extent SGLT2 inhibitors, which also have multiple benefits in terms of CV and kidney protection, and I won't take much time, so the stage belongs to Dr. Vivek and Dr. Wazir today. So I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague Dr. Vivek Kumar, who is a senior consultant intervention cardiologist, keeps on doing new stuff and posting in our group. So we keep on congratulating him that I have done this, I have done that. So multiple accolades. So he did his GM cardiology in 2012 from BHU. So multiple, he is a master in complex coronary procedures, members of multiple societies, multiple publications. So welcome Dr. Vivek for taking this forward, and a big thanks to him for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satish. After such a generous introduction and setting the agenda by Dr. Chauhan and everybody and calling me a friend, definitely I'm a friend here. It's all familiar faces. We are very late, so I'll not take much of a time, and I'm not going to give anything new here. We are just going to discuss what we know, and just to sensitize us that why it is important, the weight of diabetes. So that's the topic that I have here, beyond the basics, complex interplay of cardiac, kidney and metabolic health. And this is what I'm going to discuss in the next some slides. So definitely let's understand what is CKM, that is cardio kidney metabolic syndrome. What's the Indian reality of CKM syndrome, and what CKM benefits with GLP-1 receptor agonist and how it works. So coming to CKM syndrome, what has been there in front of us, but we were maybe not realizing the problem itself. What we understand today, that American Heart Association has given a definition to this thing which was there, which it was like in front of us, but we were not able to understand like a lot of things our human mind don't see. So CKM syndrome, AHA has defined as a systemic disorder characterized by pathophysiological interactions among metabolic risk factors like type 2 diabetes mellitus, obesity, dyslipidemia, hypertension, etc., CKD and cardiovascular system, leading to multi-organ dysfunction and a high rate of adverse cardiovascular outcomes. And believe me, it was all there. We are just trying to define and understand together. So let's start CKM syndrome. How does it start? So stage 0 is when you don't have any risk factor. Stage 1 is the initiating point where you have excess dysfunctional. This is the point. Okay, yeah. So stage 1 is the excess dysfunctional adipose tissue, obviously with overweight, obesity, abdominal obesity, impaired glucose tolerance are the traits that we see. And now you have a manifest form where person has a hypertension, hypertriglyceridemia, type 2 diabetes mellitus, metabolic syndrome that we know for a long time, and obviously moderate to high risk of CKD. Then we have stage 3, which is like patient has a subclinical ASCVD, subclinical heart failure, and now the ultimate outcome that is worst in every aspect. Patient has a manifest advanced disease in form of coronary heart disease, heart failure, atrial fibrillation, stroke and peripheral artery disease. So this is the continuum of CKM syndrome, from stage 0 where there is no risk factor to a manifest multi-organ involvement, and this is what CKM syndrome is. So the puzzle here is that what is the initiator, the amplifier and the outcome. So initiator, what we understand today, is the metabolic dysfunction that involves impaired glucose tolerance, added fat deposits, pancreatic dysfunction and involving fatty liver. That is a hallmark of this feature. Patient amplifier is CKD. How does CKD amplify this syndrome? We'll understand in the next few slides, and definitely the cardiovascular outcome. So we have a metabolic dysfunction to play with, then we have an amplifier in the form of CKD syndrome, and the manifest form, that is the CKM syndrome in form of cardiovascular features and complications that we see in patients. But there is one puzzle that is missing. We'll go to that. How can we plug this puzzle so that we can really stop the beginning of this adverse pathophysiology at play? So coming to Indian reality of CKM syndrome. So what is there in our neighborhood, our friends and colleagues here is this reality. So this is a paper published in Lancet Diabetes 2023. You see the prevalence of dyslipidemia in Indian subject about 39%, obesity 28%, hypertension and diabetes and pre-diabetes 26%. And this is the geographical boundaries where you can see the dyslipidemia is more in the northern central India, hypertension more in southern India and eastern India, and obesity all across the India. So the red is the highest prevalence. So this is what we are facing today. And Indians are different. We all know that. Why? Because they have central obesity, increased waist circumference, thin fat. That is, our people, even the BMI may not be high, but in compared to the muscle, they have more fat. So we call sarcopenic obesity. They have high rates of insulin resistance. We have LDL levels which are high, and more commonly we often found in our patients with manifest CVD disease that they have low SDL, and the LDL may not be so high, but low SDL is like a very common phenomenon in our patients. And apart from that, we have onset of diabetes at 2 decades early, youths with early onset diabetes, and there is a lifetime risk of diabetes even at age 20, high inflammation in form of high CRP levels, and our patients tend to have early heart attacks, early CV events that are more deadly in compared to Western population. And what thing that really changes and what I feel is our core is our diet, activity and exercise. Our diet is high in carbohydrate, uneven dietary patterns like fasting and feasting, reusing oil for cooking, less intake of fruits and vegetables. Activity, so more than half of Indians are physically inactive, and that's the most unfortunate feature of Indian population, and less than 10% engage in recreational physical activity. Maybe the reason is in our the way we teach our children. So पढ़ेगा लिखेगा तो बनेगा खराब, पढ़ेगा लिखेगा तो बनेगा नवाब, खेलेगा कूदेगा तो होगा खराब. And this is the thing that we teach our children. I think this needs to be changed. खेलना भी उतना जरूरी है जितना पढ़ना है. So coming to the CKM puzzle. So what is the solution for the CKM syndrome? And this is what we are going to discuss about. So what the solution could be: something which reduces glucose, reduces weight, reduces progression of CKD, and obviously will lead to reduced cardiovascular events. And GLP receptor 1 agonist is one such contender. It's a weight loss through appetite regulation, and we know how it works here. Essentially what it does is that it decreases with certain hormones hunger, energy intake and food craving. It increases satiety here. And if you see the benefits are multifold. Some are direct, some are indirect. So at the brain level it reduces appetite, and additional non-specific effect is reduction of stroke. It has impact of reduction in body weight. In heart disease, we know we'll go to that slides where we show that how it's benefits the heart. It reduces fatty liver, it increases insulin secretion and decreases insulin resistance, and it has effect on kidney. So actions of GLP-1 receptor agonist on CKM outcome, if you see here, so how does it work on the cardiovascular system? There are certain direct effects which are related to its effect on the inflammatory milieu and how it improves the endothelial function. We all know that nitric oxide is a very important component of start of endothelial consumption. In all the CVD patients, the endogenous nitric oxide system is impaired, and GLP through some actions increases nitric oxide, reduces ICAM and VCAM that are responsible to the inflammatory cells accumulation in the plaque, improves vascular smooth muscle activation, increases proliferation of smooth muscle fibers here, reduces inflammation, and the core is reduction in lipid accumulation. The indirect effect is through reduction of blood pressure, weight, and improvement of HbA1c. And the cardio protection that happens is not one step. What it has direct effect on blood vessels, reduces the atherosclerotic plaque proliferation, but at the same time at the heart, it has a positive remodeling effect. It reduces apoptosis, inflammation, improves glucose metabolism, and in kidneys we know all the different actions. It reduces intraglomerular pressure, improves decreases albuminuria, retards the reduction of GFR, and at the fatty liver and everything is there. And if you see the effect in evidence that we have today is that there are evidences that suggest that it reduces 10% fatal or non-fatal MI, 30% reduction of cardiovascular death, and 70% reduction in fatal and non-fatal stroke. And there is a 14% reduction in 3 mix. So what we are contemplating here is that the fourth piece of puzzle at the CKM, at the heart of CKM, is that by GLP-1 receptor agonist, and what we can do is that we can hit at the core where we have reduction in improvement in adipocyte functions that helps to decrease the amplifying effect of kidney as well as the adverse effect that we have. And apart from that, it has beneficial effect in both HFrEF and HFpEF patients, and there are meta-analysis that show that GLP-1 receptor agonist reduces 11% of hospitalization in heart failure patients, irrespective of HFpEF and HFrEF patients. And that's the reason why the guidelines have started recommending GLP-1 receptor agonists globally, like EACL, PGO, ADA, as well as ASC, all recommend that in patients with diabetes and patients with high risk of CKM, GLP-1 receptor agonist becomes a very good choice for advising such patients. So choosing the right anti-diabetic patient becomes, and Sir will highlight here that we all see that a GLP-1 receptor agonist has a glucose lowering efficacy, effect on body weight, severe risk factors, and has a pleiotropic effects that will lead to multiple CKD benefits, cardiovascular benefits, and the best part is that there is less risk of hypoglycemia. So if you fix in the puzzle that metabolic dysfunction, which is the initiator of the CKM syndrome, amplifier being the chronic kidney disease, and the cardiovascular outcome that we face day in, day out in our practices, if you add GLP-1 receptor agonist into this puzzle, in this jigsaw puzzle, we may achieve things which are like beyond our realization, and will change the whole landscape and treatment, the way we deal with diabetes, we deal with obesity, we deal with CVD events. So it's one plug at the core of this
Very good.
will lead to multiple.
So thank you, Dr. Vivek. We'll take the questions at the end, so don't get impatient. So you will get to ask all the difficult questions you want to ask. So I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Wazir, who is a fabulous speaker. So he is going to intro you. Can I have the introductory slides, please? So again, he is like multiple accolades, so the Director Division of Diabetes and Endocrinology at Medanta. So welcome to this part of Delhi. So he keeps on traveling all over the country and all the world, but again, grateful that he got the time to come here. So he has been a core member, and starting from initial days of Medanta, the Medanta endocrinology development has gone up so much. So all thanks to Dr. Wazir and his team, and so multiple accolades, multiple publications, we all know that. So I'm not going to go into details of it. I will hand over it to him and he will speak for himself.
Thanks, Abhishek. And Vivek, thanks a lot for sharing the context. A very interesting thing which happens, and as we grow in our professional lives and doing the CMEs, you realize that the slide set which you got is very different from what you see here. So the slide set here is I'm seeing for the first time. But I'll try to navigate through these because this is not the slide set given to me. But anyway, this is something which we know about. It's been there for a very, very long time. GLP-1, as Saptarishi said, we've been using these group of drugs for pretty long. Oral semaglutide came up in 2022. And we have the dual agonist, we have injectable semaglutide present here. And Vivek very rightly put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And he talked about the initiator are the cardiovascular risk factors, the propagator, presence of CKD. So simple, somebody who has diabetes has an X risk. Diabetes and obesity multiplies the risk, and you have hypertension, you have dyslipidemia, and then the complications start appearing, which is CKD. End result or manifestation, as he rightly said. The final thing is cardiovascular disease and death and mortality. But diabetes and obesity gives us a chance of prevention. Somebody who has risk, not the manifest disease or diabetes, you can prevent diabetes. But once they develop diabetes, you prevent complications. And once they have complications, you go on to the next level of prevention, of secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. So diabetes and obesity care or pediatric care is all about prevention, limiting the risk. So earlier on, before these newer drugs came, our conventional teaching was all about early aggressive management. UKPDS, Steno, advanced trial all told us the earlier on you start off by providing a glycemic control, you give the best benefits. I'm just setting a context because I don't know which slides are coming, but essentially they would be talking the same, and I'll navigate you through these. So it started off all where way back, over 100 years ago, we had insulin as treatment of diabetes, and all they did at that time was to prevent loss of life by giving insulin. Even Jocelyn said, we don't know what will happen if we control the blood glucose levels. And then it evolved. We had the UKPDS, the advanced, the EDIC trial, the Accord trial, the VIDT, which told us early aggressive management leads to prevention of complications. And then the Steno 2 trial said multi-pronged approach in diabetes management is the best bet for preventing complications. So everything at that time was centered around blood glucose management and then multiple risk factors to prevent complications. However, with what Vivek presented, now we have drugs. It was all incited with the SGLT2 inhibitors. This is the new slide set? Yes. Okay. My savior is arrived. But I think I was doing fine.
सर ऐसे बताना
हाँ मैं ऐसे ही बता रहा हूँ मैं ऐसे ही बताता हूँ that's why I'm not standing here
सर आप वजीर हो
yeah this is more familiar so CKM actually L should also be there CKLM because liver is another target fatty liver, NAFLD, MASH, and their outcomes. So the complete composite of managing metabolic diseases, diabetes is one of them, is the CKL and M. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's start with the initiators or the risk factors for the complications of diabetes. With the major reason for mortality and morbidity in diabetes or metabolic diseases is the heart, the liver, the kidney, the primary organs. So first of all, GLP-1 RAs, including semaglutide, provide a very durable and very effective glycemic control by basis of these about 7,000 people who were exposed to the drug for a long period of time, and now all of us have experience equivalent to approximately 4 years. So 4 and 5 makes it a decade of experience on semaglutide, and we have the injectable form here where A1C reduction excellent, 1.5. You start at a higher control. Along with that, you get the extra benefit of weight loss, and that weight loss is primarily the fat loss that we are talking about. It is adiposity, it is ABCD, adiposity-based chronic disease, what we talk about. So obesity is not just how heavy one weighs, it's how heavy the impact of the excess fat is on a person's health. That's the very basic thing. It's not about your weight. A muscular body may weigh about 100 kgs, but he or she is not obese. So that's the basic thing. It's all about fat, and fat reduction. So excellent weight loss. Now this is 5 kilograms. I don't agree with this. In clinical practice, all of us have used semaglutide a lot. And we know our patients respond at lesser doses and much greater reduction in their weights. So last about 3.5, 4 years of experience, I can say this with good confidence. 5 to 10% of people on oral semaglutide may not tolerate the drug. 5 to 10%. 85% people respond very well. Out of that 85%, about 30 to 35% patients are kind of super responders. They are the ones who go to the 15 and 20% weight loss with oral semaglutide, but that's not a rule. If you ask me an average number with 14 milligrams of semaglutide, I would say anywhere in between 10 to 15% weight loss. We all agree on that, and that is the power. Weight loss is a direct linear relationship with amount of weight loss and benefits. With the starting benefits with 3%, and diabetes remission will start at 15%, and mortality and morbidity benefits start appearing at 15%. So whatever we do, if we can go towards the 15 to 20%, we maximize the benefits to our patients. So tick marks on durable glycemic control, excellent weight loss, and we have a subgroup of patients who respond very, very well. There are about 10 to 15% non-responders also with the drug who just don't lose weight. So clinical trials, whenever we go to somebody's house, we go with a basket of goodies. So the basket of goodies has a lot of things in it. And the basket of goodies with semaglutide is a composite. It's not just glycemic control, it's glycemic control plus weight loss. So combined benefit leads to multiplication of the organ protection by these drugs. And as I said, it's all about fat loss. But in pediatric medicine, and those interested in pediatric care, whenever you prescribe a plan for weight reduction, never forget to take care of the muscles. The muscles is the under-investigated, under-reported, and we don't give them interventions. But if you really want to be successful in pediatric care, you have to invest in proteins and muscle training. The real success. So ideal prescription may have an anti-obesity medication like semaglutide, but it must have a nutritional component which talks about proteins. And all of us, our diets are anyway poor in proteins, and being an Asian Indian, our muscle mass is relatively lesser than the Caucasian. So we need to protect the muscle mass for optimizing the health benefits of semaglutide. That's, I won't say a warning, but that's a caution we need to do whenever prescribing anti-obesity medications. Now going on to the other basket of goodies, excellent blood pressure reduction, beneficial effect on the lipid profile, and we all know whatever metabolic disorder we talk about, it finally funnels down to inflammation and these molecules like CRP, ICAM and all those things. That is the final frontier. How the organ damage happens is by inflammation. So semaglutide as compared to empagliflozin showed an excellent reduction in the pro-inflammatory markers. Is it a direct benefit or run through weight loss or fat loss is still not known, but definitely the benefit is there. So we've taken care of the initiators, excellent blood glucose control, excellent weight loss, fat loss, benefits on blood pressure, benefits on lipids. Now let's go to the amplifier, as Vivek talked about, is CKD. Can we use this drug in patients who have compromised kidney functions? So let's take an example of a patient who has a BMI 32, has a GFR of let's say 40, and A1C of 8, is on multiple medications. Is this patient going to benefit? Let's take that as a kind of a patient. So here, irrespective of their GFR, what this slide says, you'll have excellent weight loss, similar to that with normal renal functions, and an excellent reduction in the A1C. However, in the more advanced patients with renal failure, those who are end-stage renal disease, anyway have issues with their appetites, nausea and vomiting, it may not be the greatest choice in those extreme cases. But the ones who have a moderate renal failure by their GFRs, lack of symptoms, coexistence, poor glycemic control and the presence of obesity should be the right indication of using these drugs. So maintain glycemic control, good weight loss in these patients, and over a period of 3 months, these trials show it reduced the reduction in the GFR, and very importantly, like the SGLT2 data, we had reduction in the urine albumin creatinine ratio. So they had greater proteinuria. Their proteinuria reduced over a short period of time of about 3 months. This is a short period and a great benefit. And these are the mechanisms, we can talk about them later if you're really interested. But as a clinician, what excites me, I start the patient and they start getting good results beyond just reduction of risk factors. It's the organ protection which is coming out so clearly in this slide. Now coming to the final frontier of the outcome of the CKM is cardiovascular disease outcomes. We had a brief from Dr. Vivek about the trial data. Now let's thrash out in the last few slides of what actually benefits happen in these patients. So the Pioneer 6 trial was done as a CVOT, as a safety mandate by FDA. It was not designed to give superiority of oral semaglutide, but still the exploratory analysis showed 21% MACE reduction, 51% reduction in CV deaths, and 49% all-cause mortality. Not statistically significant because the trial was not designed to give superiority, it was just for safety. So evidence started appearing here about the possible cardiovascular benefits of oral semaglutide, and then very recently all of you heard about or have attended or presented the SOUL data. Was a very long trial on a very large number of patients, nearing 10,000 patients, about 800 from our country, about the cardiovascular outcomes with oral semaglutide. Very importantly, above 50 years, diabetes, their A1Cs and established cardiovascular disease were the inclusion criteria. Now I will spend extra minute on this slide because this is extremely important. And this is a big paradigm change in the way we are treating diabetes in today's day. First, let's look at the duration of diabetes. 1.5 decades of diabetes. Let's go back to UKPDS that said newly diagnosed diabetics, short duration of diabetes, give them glycemic control and protect their organs. Microvascular in the short term, macrovascular in the long term. We all agree about that. Steno 2 said the same. Now, what are we trying to prove here? Long duration of diabetes And then we had the Accord trial, which said long duration of diabetes, patients with established complications, do not give them tight glycemic control, right? We all agree on that, and the trial was prematurely terminated. So here, with semaglutide, we have 15 years of diabetes, suboptimal glycemic control, and this is multiple risk factors present. The good thing about application of this data to our practice would be a good representation of patients from Asia or Asian origin. Reasonable, 25% is pretty good. However, these were extremely high-risk patients in which protection of the organ requires something much beyond glycemic control. It has been proven. If you provide glycemic control here, you might not be able to provide a benefit in their outcomes, their events, their cardiovascular mortality, etc., etc. So, you see the distribution of the end organ damages, including up to moderate renal failure. We had a good representation. It's an extremely high risk population. On top of that, in today's day, most of our patients are on all of these cardioprotective medications, and about 30% of these patients were on SGLT2 inhibitors. We all know about their cardiovascular renal benefits. Now this is a tough challenge for any drug to produce results in a situation like this in patients who have had diabetes for over 15 years. But here come the results. 14% reduction in the 3P MACE, cardiovascular death, non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke. Excellent 14% on top of 15 years of diabetes, on top of having ACE, ARB, statins, their aspirins and SGLT2 inhibitors, and the benefit starts appearing as early as 6 months. So what conversation do I have with my patient? Is that this is your risk profile. I believe you will get this kind of a benefit up and above the medications you're already on, is the conversation we're having with the patient to make them understand. Because cost is an issue with these drugs. But once we give the merits of the drug, we have a definite acceptance of these medications in the patients. This refuses to move.
Very good.
So again, we have a lot of these cardiovascular trials here, Infrared, Canvas, Leader, Redefine, all of these showing approximately similar reduction in the MACE. But see here, in this is probably the highest risk patient category with the greatest cardiovascular protection being already provided, and you get equivalent cardiovascular protection. This is amazing. Till now we haven't had any drug doing such benefits up and above the cardiovascular protection with a long duration of diabetes existing. The primary driver for the cardiovascular benefits was coming from the non-fatal myocardial infarction reduction, which was about 26%. Rest of them were trending towards significance. But to me as a clinician, what is important is, even if it is not statistically significant, some benefit is happening towards the betterment of our patients. Patient subcategories, but very important, because on an average, the A1C of patients coming to me for the first time at our OPD at Medanta would be in excess of 9. So how would these patients benefit with these drugs? Very clearly, they seem to maximize the benefits, and patients of Asian origin or Asian Indians seem to respond better. As I said, in our clinical experience for the last 3 to 4 years, our patients are showing much better weight loss as compared to the Caucasian data, which is very, very welcome. Other outcomes, the kidney outcomes, though not statistically significant, reduction, that's enough for me. I showed you a slide earlier in that, cardiovascular death. The final frontier or the strength of any medication used in any metabolic disease is how well you can protect loss of life. There are two determinants of any treatment: quality of life and quantity of life. Quality of life is all the risk factors we were talking about. Quantity of life is mortality, though not significant, but a 7% result for me is a great achievement. This is exactly what we translate into clinical practice while explaining these drugs, these newer drugs and their merits to our patients. Now, limb ischemia events also majorly being reduced over these 5 years in the patients. MACE, now this was a comparison, so about 26% of these patients were also on SGLT2 inhibitors, up and above addition of semaglutide. So with SGLT2 inhibitors, 11% reduction. Without SGLT2 inhibitors, it increased to 16%. We can have a discussion on the differences, why it's happening, but the hunch is that there are differential benefits of SGLT2 inhibitors on some complications and GLP-1s on others. That's where using them as a combination maximizes the complementary benefits on outcomes. Non-fatal MI, similar. Non-fatal stroke. So essentially these three slides are saying that the drug is working very, very well as far as cardiovascular outcomes are concerned, and in some complications complementary use would magnify the benefits. Adverse events leading to discontinuation are very well known to us. They are either upper GI or lower GI. Upper GI, nausea, vomiting, all are easily manageable. However, lower GI, like loose motions, torrential loose motions at times may lead to discontinuation of the drug. So in summary, a 14% reduction in cardiovascular outcomes, their MACE, we saw trends towards non-significant reduction in mortality, their kidney outcomes, along with long durable effectiveness in A1C reduction, excellent weight loss with some patients losing in excess of 15%, but not as a rule. Benefits on their lipids, their blood pressure, heart, liver, kidney and brain protection. I have not presented the data on the liver, but that actually comes from injectable semaglutide, which is Wegovy. Since we're talking about oral semaglutide, we're limiting to the data available on that. So with this, a repetition of the slides which Dr. Vivek presented, essentially all of these things makes it a big game changer for the patients who actually deserve it. Not all of them, but essentially most of the patients who attend the OPD with type 2 diabetes are either overweight or obese. Most of them have multiple cardiovascular risk factors, if not complications present. So essentially, if cost is not an issue, lots more patients can benefit with these group of drugs for the final outcomes or the CKM and the liver outcomes with judicious, correct, choose the right patient, use the right doses, gradual titration. It's a mixture of managing their side effects and getting the clinical benefits is the final pearl of knowledge I would like to share with all of you. And I thank all of you for your kind listening. Thank you very much.
लाइट जला देना, लाइट ऑन कर देना. Thank you very much for your attention to this wonderful topic. I'm sure you must be having some questions, and I would request you to please ask them through the chairperson. And I would first give it to Dr. Saptrishi to set the context for both the talks, and then I'll come to you one by one.
I think both the speakers have done a very fabulous job. So thank you, Dr. Vivek, Dr. Wazir. So we know that this is a molecule which has this group of molecules has evolved over time, and it's still evolving. So we are getting we now have single agonists. So we have dual agonists, and maybe we are moving on to triple agonists, and we are getting better and better results with each of them. So they have proven benefit in terms of cardiovascular disease. They have proven benefits in emerging benefits in terms of renal disease, as well as MS, LD, or which was earlier called NASH. So I don't take much time from you asking the question, so I have the pleasure of directing you to them and not answering it myself. So over to all of you, if you have any questions, you are.
Yes, Dr. Poddar, before you ask your questions, wonderful questions, sir. I have spoken both to Dr. Wazir and to Dr. Vivek, and both of them have agreed to make peace, and both this beautiful agreement that they are going to make is going to benefit the world, and it is going to benefit all of us. It is. I'm sorry, I just got inspired by Trump. No. I think they had a wonderful presentation. My talk to my first question to Dr. Vivek. Dr. Vivek, we know from Empire that there was a reduction of MACE, which translated into cardiovascular benefits, which translated into reduction into cardiovascular death by 38% and overall death by 32%. This was the first trial in which we found that there was the bridging of the micro and the macrovascular divide. In previous trials, including the trial, wonderful trial conducted from 1977 to 1997 called the Unique, and then the follow-up up till 2007, we found that there was a lot of effect on the microvascular front, but when it came to the macrovascular disease, there was not much effect. I wanted to know from you, if we add this wonderful drug called Rybelsus or semaglutide, what are we gaining on the macrovascular front?
Sir, I think it's an excellent observation and conclusion that you have drawn. And as Dr. Wazir already highlighted the major focus that we had initially. Initially the focus was on glycemic control. We were missing the piece of puzzle that it's something beyond glycemic control that's happening at the beginning. So the UKPDS trial or other trials that happened initially, they were just focused on HbA1c reduction. And what they showed definitely was that, okay, if you have a good glucose control, the microvascular complications like nephropathy or retinopathy is reduced, but the macrovascular events, CV events, are not so much depleted. Some trials it was increasing if you go for a more stricter glycemic control as at all happened. So that was, I think, the period where maybe we were missing drugs like SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 receptor agonists because we are missing the point. But it's not the glycemia that is the problem, it is the adiposity or is the problem, the adipose tissue is the problem. And definitely with this SOUL trial that came and Dr. Wazir definitely highlighted. I mean, if you compare EMPA-REG with SOUL trial, there is a lot of difference. EMPA-REG was just a trial on diabetic patients showing cardiovascular outcome benefits. Here, in the SOUL trial, I think I will say that investigators were very bold because they were trying in a patient. So if you want to prove that I am better, you would like to fight with a lesser opponent, a weaker opponent. But here, my inclusion criteria was establish CVD in the
High
patients
risk
of CVD.
population.
High risk population. And that was the merit of this trial. And proving in 14% reduction in 3P MACE proves the concept that GLP-1 receptor agonist started. The concept was that it's not hyperglycemia that is the problem, it's the inflammatory milieu, it's the adipose tissue that is the problem. So hitting the right target. So I just wanted to point out this point that, so we must have watched this movie recently, Mission Impossible. You remember there was a source code. I think we were missing the source code, and it is a virus, it is an antivirus to that source code that molecules and GLP-1 receptor agonist, because they are acting at the core of the problem. And as you can see, Dr. Wazir had presented that you had, surprisingly great reduction in 13% and cardiac death. So cardiac death has multiple factors. If somebody has an MI, he is not able to reach to a center which has a primary PCI, he is going to die. But if a patient reaches a center, if he has an MI, he will survive. So death, I think, is not the right outcome analysis factor. I think reduction of MI or other events are more related to drug itself. So because somebody dying can be because of multiple reasons. So I think the benefit that this trial, this drug shows is remarkable, and as pointed that if cost is not a constraint, in ideal patients this is a great molecule and we are going to save a lot of adverse side effects.
Right, sir. Wonderful. Dr. Wazir, sir, wonderful talk, sir. And you mentioned a trial called Accord, sir. And you also mentioned that in the intensive arm of Accord, the trial had to be terminated prematurely because there were actually increased signals for mortality with the sulfonylurea which was being used. Now I want to understand from you, sir, if you combine these trials, the SOUL trial, the trials with SGLT2 inhibitors and the Accord trial, we have been traditionally told that it is glycemia which is very important. Now we learned from EMPA-REG that glycemia does not matter. That actually when you had the glycemic equipoise in EMPA-REG, there were people who had only a difference of 0.5-0.6% in the HbA1c. But the cardiovascular mortality decreased by 38%. And the overall mortality by a whopping 32%. I want to understand from you, sir, what is happening in SOUL which is so significant? Is it the weight loss, or is it something beyond that, that is beyond the comprehension of lesser mortals like us? And maybe you understand it better, sir. Please make it clear to us, sir. What is happening in SOUL which is making a huge reduction of MACE by 14%, and then, sir, and you also mentioned, sir, the overall mortality may not be impacted greatly. What is the actual impact on overall mortality? I want to understand, sir.
Excellent. So I'll start off with a compliment to you, because since I've entered, I was the first one to come here, and you introduced me to everybody, and you were complimenting everybody, but I never heard a compliment about you from anybody. So, वही आ रहा है, and you have an elephant's memory. The way you were recollecting everything about everybody, you kind of knew their entire lives, and you have a lion's heart. Really, it was amazing. So coming to the core of your question is that if today I get a crore rupee lottery, what will I do with that? I will put it in various segments. So that is intelligent investment, diversify your funds to keep it safe and maximize your benefits. So the answer to your question is, why is it happening? It's not one reason. Is it glycemic control? It is a part of the benefit. And as I said, all the clinical trials we see at this point of time, their A1Cs are 8. they're not very high risk people. By virtue of the fact that they've been poorly controlled for 15 years, challenges and getting benefits challenges the legacy effect and the metabolic memory that we all have grown up with. Early aggressive treatment is the only way. We're challenging that. In that we're in total agreement. Mechanistically, both SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1RAs act on absolutely different pathways. If I have to make it very simple, GLP-1RAs is, he would bear me out, is more of an anti-atherosclerotic kind of drug. And he presented that beautiful slide where the vessel wall, the intima media, the nitrous oxide and all those things. The SGLT2 inhibitors act in a very, very different way. That's where their SGLT2 inhibitors, other than natriuresis or decreasing their within the kidney, their inflammation, the anti-inflammatory, don't know what's going on. Similarly, GLP-1RAs, they do act, increase natriuresis, they act on the potassium hydrogen exchangers in the PCT, but that's all we know. Why are they translating? We say, oh, weight loss, but weight loss, if we nullify the effect of weight loss, we are still looking at benefit of organ protection, primarily taking us away from the glucocentric approach. However, not to propagate that glycemic control is not important. That is still the core. So the ideal thing, which I tell my patients is, you need to do 4 things. The A, B, C and O. A is the A1C, B blood pressure, C cholesterol, O is obesity or bariatric care. And it is not just you have a medication for glycemic control, not just a ACE/ARB for your BP, not just a statin, not just a weight loss medication. It is treat to target. You will only get the benefit of organ protection when the A, B, C and O are taken care of. Now let's go back finally to your question. Both SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1RAs are targeting these 4 core things. Maybe tomorrow we get newer drugs, I'll maybe say 5 or 6 or 7, but essentially that's how, as a clinician, what is driving the benefits of organ protection for these drugs. So even in GLP-1RA, we had Rewind saying stroke ka ho raha hai. We have this saying that non-fatal myocardial infarction is reducing, and there is a lot of difference. Emparex said stroke rate may increase, hemorrhagic strokes may increase. Dapagliflozin says neutral or maybe reduction. There is heterogeneity within these drugs also. So appreciate it.
So I think I will go back to your equipedias legacy point first. So we need to understand that why these trials like SOUL or EMPERIC, they were done in people who had existing ASCVD with the purpose. So now FDA has removed that clause that all new medications have to undergo ASCVD outcome trial. So why this all started? It started with osiglitazone. So there is some CV safety issues, it increases amylates and all. So then FDA mandated that all medications which get approved, they have to undergo a CV outcome trial within a certain time after approval. So all these series of trials, starting from EMPERIC or Rewind or liraglutide related trials, SGLT2, so all started because of that. Now they have realized that okay, it doesn't make much sense to do an ASCVD trial for all these molecules. It's not a mandate, but again most of the companies have actually done it. So you cannot compare UKPDS with EMPERIC or SOUL or any other CV outcome trial has been done. All these CV outcome trials have been done in populations who are already have pre-existing atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. They already have the heart disease, or they have 3 risk factors or more, which predisposes them to a very high risk of ASCVD. So you cannot compare UKPDS versus the current trial. So those are entirely into different group of patients. For UKPDS, what we have seen, you do intensive glycemic control, and with agents, what were the agents which were used in UKPDS? Anyone of you? So they use levetiracetam, chlorpropamide, NPH insulin, they use regular insulin, and they use metformin. So these were and towards the end they had started using 5-liter also. These are the only medications that were approved for UKPDS. So what they found at the end of the trial, microvascular outcome definitely improved. Macrovascular outcome improved only in the metformin obesity with metformin in the obesity subgroup. So that is why metformin in all the subsequent trials came up as the first agent for type 2 diabetes management. But UKPDS did reinforce that glycemic control is important. So ACCORD trial again was an intermediate trial before the CV outcomes started coming in. Published around in 2008 or so. ACCORD, ADVANCE and VADT, they were the three trials which were published in NEJM one by one. So VADT and ADVANCE were neutral, and ACCORD was something which showed that if you go for intensive glycemic control, the mortality rate goes up in the intensive arm compared to the standard arm. But many of you, if you look into the trial, so ACCORD was one of the trials which had the lowest CV rates. So in spite of a significantly higher CV rate in the intensive control arm, for which the intensive glycemic control arm was prematurely stopped. So the number of events in ACCORD was very, very less. So you cannot still move away the importance of intensive good glycemic control. And this was a population which again had multiple risk factors of pre-existing HCVD. So you cannot compare a group of people who have diabetes which has started just now versus somebody who has come to you at 65 years of age. The cardiac surgeon of the cardiac Dr. Vivek Kumar has referred to you, अच्छा इनको तो MI हो गया, आपको क्या करना है? So वो दोनों management में फर्क है. So many of our patients which will be getting in OPD will be coming at the age of 30-35 years. So if you think that ACCORD is something, अच्छा, you cannot plan their treatment on the basis of ACCORD. You need to plan their treatment on the basis of UKPDS. Because this was a group which was like comparatively newly diagnosed diabetes, which showed that intensive glycemic control, even at 44 years, the legacy effect still persisted in terms of both microvascular and macrovascular outcome. So there was a EASD presentation in last year, where UKPDS still, after 44 years, the legacy effect still persisted. So for so this, we obviously will have much better results with if you had been using SGLT2 inhibitors or a GLP-1 agonist in a trial like UKPDS. I'm not sure whether somebody will come up with a trial like UKPDS for now, but again, so this is, you need to segregate the patients which we were treating. So if somebody is having advanced cardiovascular disease, you need to get in a GLP-1 analog, you need to get in a GLP-1 inhibitor. Newly diagnosed, so again you need to get in these molecules because they are going to give you long-term benefits.
Let me complete the question. We talked about mortality. So you've actually answered that. Nobody is going to invest in doing a trial for 20 years anymore. But I believe what we're doing today, after 20 years, the benefit is only because right now we're not seeing any sizable change in the mortality related to diabetes. But I guess it will take that much more time of 10 years. Right.
Sir, we have one point about UKPDS. I think the recent data, 20 years of follow-up, 44 years. Yeah, it said that now the macrovascular complications are also significantly reduced. So it takes 40 years for that effect.
No. Even in the legacy effect also, that is why even 20 years down the line, even if the intensive and the standard arm, the difference was reduced. So even then also the macrovascular and the concept of legacy effect came in from there. So you do early intensive glycemic control, and earlier you didn't have those molecules So I heard to Dr. Diffonzo's lecture when he had come around 2-3 months back. So his concept was that the risk is linear. The risk related to cardiovascular disease or microvascular disease is ultimately linear. So you have agents where if you can get an HbA1c of 5.8 or 5.9 or 5.5 without getting hypoglycemia. You have GLP-1 analogs, you have HL2 inhibitors, you have metformin, you have DPP-4. None of them is going to cause hypoglycemia, and you can break down the HbA1c to this. So they will be almost, if you have a trial where you can push people to this level of HbA1c. So if often you tend to downgrade the treatment. अच्छा चलो आपका HbA1c बहुत अच्छा आ गया, चलो कम कर देते थोड़ा दवा. But you are not giving sulfonylureas. As long as you are not giving sulfonylureas and you are bringing an HbA1c down to 5.5, 5.6. So even from pre-diabetes onwards, the risk is linear. So you lower the HbA1c, you get without causing hypoglycemia, you are going to get breast.
So I have a leading question from this that we have two brain people here. So correct me if I'm wrong. In the ACCORD trial, the intensive arm had an HbA1c target of 6. Right. So is it now time where we have drugs which doesn't cause severe hypoglycemia? Is it a time to do this trial again with an HbA1c of 6 as a target using semaglutide or SGLT2 inhibitors?
Nobody is going to invest in that. But you're right.
Yeah.
Conceptually, that absolutely needed, but nobody is going to invest so much because.
Can you take the mic? We can't take.
It's going to be
So
very
again, if we get a trial like ACCORD now with agents where you are not using sulfonylurea or insulin, so you won't get that result of which, again, I told you, if you look into the ACCORD data, so the number of events were very, very less compared to any severe trial, but the numbers were more in the intensity.
But see, the thing is that hypoglycemia is a killer.
Hypoglycemia is
So when what this point was, when you're going at a A1C of like 6 and you have a sulfonylurea or you have insulin, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
But your point was very good that if we nowadays get so many patients who are on those.
So that is not my point. That is what Dr. Diffonzo told when he had come
It
here.
makes sense. It makes
So
sense.
after this debate or academic discussion, which was I think of national level conference by 3 excellent speakers and chairperson and Dr. Chauhan. So my questions are very simple. Can this drug be given to normal weight diabetics?
Not well, they can be. There is no, even with the dual agonist, it is not a cutoff point. Diabetes is an indication. However, as a clinician, the correct indications, these are my personal views, would be somebody who has obesity, somebody who has high cardiovascular risk and uncontrolled diabetes. It's not that you can't give. Will those people get the cardiovascular benefits or not? I can't answer that. But it's not contraindicated.
So again, apparently in Indian or Asian context, who are normal weight are actually not normal weight. They still have a lot of abdominal obesity and lot of visceral adiposity. So these are all people who are going to benefit from it. So and we know that higher doses of oral semaglutide, we have the Oasis trial data also published now. So that does quite well as an anti-obesity agent also for people who don't have diabetes. So that way, so if you consider in Indian context anybody with a BMI of 24, 25, 23, it's an anti-diabetic agent which you can use, and with the HbA1c reduction with a gliptin is like 0.6 or 0.7. With oral semaglutide it will be 5.2 or 1.5.
Then if you're talking about the lean diabetic BMI of 90,
आपका होता नहीं है आपका होता नहीं है
हाँ चलो बोलो बोलो
है नहीं क्या होगा
एक मिनट रुको यार.
रुको यार
दूसरी कार्ड नहीं है क्या?
अभी होगा
ना ना
Sir, please.
Please be serious. It's I think a great academic discussion which is going on.
Please.
We have 3 very good speakers and Vaibhav Ball, our Dr. Chauhan. And my next question, can it be given as first drug to obese diabetic? First drug. even before metformin, before.
You can.
Intolerant to metformin can be given.
No, why not? Even before metformin. What is the?
Let's create.
Intolerant to metformin.
There is no right or wrong answer to the question. It's just choosing the right patient. That is the right answer. It's somebody who's had multiple attempts towards losing weight, progressively gaining weight, total body fat, and we talked about, Saptarishi also talked about visceral fat, multiple attempts. A1C is not very bad. You're not looking at a catabolic state. Strong family history of cardiovascular disease or stroke or something. This creates that ideal patient. So there is no right answer.
Absolutely.
But that is the choice.
Individualized medicine. Thank you. Because in the interest of time, I am not asking any other question.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Kandur sir, please ask your question.
बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन थे आपके पास तो.
There are three formulations of the same drug. Rybelsus, Ozempic, and Wegovy. So my question is, when we are giving 14 milligram of oral semaglutide, it has been made to be absorbable, and by having two formulations, albumin and Dacinate. Very good. But the good absorption of it from 0.04 to 0.4 to 1%. That is what I am saying. Now, what is the basis we have? Because we are giving 14 milligram. Will it not affect the, you see, gastroenteritis, kind of nausea, vomiting, etc. And then is it off-label? Because Ozempic is for major cardiovascular events, and Wegovy is for the weight reduction as per the semaglutide, you see, molecules, and Rybelsus is for.
Yeah, what the question? Sir, what
So you, there is some confusion.
just a minute, sir. Let's explain your question. The basis of giving semaglutide orally in the maximum dose, then giving Ozempic, and then giving Wegovy. So, what is the basis and which one is the best according to you?
So all of them are semaglutide. It's been formulated in a special way so that it gets absorbed. The half-life of the drug is, even with the oral formulation, is 1 week. But because very small percentage is absorbed, it needs to be taken daily to maintain that steady state. One thing taken care of. 14 milligrams of oral semaglutide is equivalent in its clinical effects, its pharmacokinetics, dynamics, equal to 1 milligram of injectable. So the clinical benefits or the side effects are similar. They track with each other.
I will just interrupt you just to make the point clear. So the absorption of oral semaglutide is 1%. Right? So if you are giving 7 mg, to 7 into 7 you multiply, it comes to 49 or 50. So that becomes equivalent to 0.5 mg of injectable semaglutide. The absorption, so if you are multiplying by 14 into 7 is 98. So that if you again, if 1% absorption, that becomes equivalent to 1 mg of semaglutide. So that 7 mg and 14 mg, so if you compare the oral and injectable semaglutide effect, so that 1% absorption, that gives the equivalence in terms of the oral and injectable. So theoretically there is not much of difference between them.
Then coming to which disease or this thing you use it, the trials of oral semaglutide Rybelsus gives it a approval by the DCGI for diabetes and weight loss and obesity. Ozempic has the same label, but Wegovy, which is 2.4 or 1.7, the trials were done in non-diabetics, hence DCGI has approved it for people with a BMI more than 27 with risk factors or more than 30 without risk factors. That is how we put them. Essentially, yeah, that's the label. That's the label.
Dr. JPS Tulsi.
So, what wonderful learning we had today from the three learned speakers. So let me begin by saying, apart from managing the type 2 diabetes and obesity, improving heart and renal outcomes as well, evolving role in the management of non-diabetic patients with CKD. Non-diabetic patients with CKD has a role here. What was it?
Non-diabetic, again, we go back to the fact that his obesity doesn't come on.
Okay, even non-obese, non-diabetic patients with CKD, to extend Dr. Podar's question.
No.
Off-label use to improve renal outcomes
So if I were
and improve CV, to reduce MACE. Non-obese, non-diabetic patients to improve CV outcomes and renal outcomes, but with CKD.
So you would rather choose a SGLT2 inhibitor in that situation than...
Yes, but this has an incremental effect over and above the SGLT2 inhibitors. Say about that, sir. It's an off-label use, I know that.
Obese, definitely yes. Non-obese, can't comment.
Off-label, sir. To improve CV outcomes.
Off-label will be off mic.
We don't have, just to highlight on that question, Dr. Tulsi's question, I think we don't have any data to back this thing, but what we know for renal
Recent
protection,
studies are ongoing on this.
definitely.
Treating patients off-label in non-obese, non-diabetic patients to improve CV outcomes and renal outcomes.
Let's see.
These studies are ongoing, experimental as well. The probably data will be appearing somewhere next year. Let me proceed. Now, GLP-1 receptor agonist, another pillar for DKD. Apart from SGLT2, MRAs, these drugs. Apart from that, another pillar for DKD.
SGLT2 after.
SGLT2, after MRAs, another pillar, sir, for DKD.
Maybe a stool, not a pillar, a stool.
Not a pillar.
A stool.
छोटा 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 छोटा
So, let us talk a little about the FLOW trial. See, type 2 diabetes patients with CKD. Renal events, reducing the risk of renal events by 24%, reducing the age by 18% and all-cause mortality by 20%. What more do you want? Talk us about the FLOW trial, sir.
Totally agree on that. And any trial done in the field of either obesity or diabetes or hypertension, higher the risk patient, greater are the benefits, that we all agree. So, going with the SGLT2 trial, FRX, mortality benefits, MACE reduction, then we have the dapagliflozin, the DECLARE trial, then the MACE reduction, mortality benefit not as much. So the point is back to the patient, in which patient was the highest risk, the highest benefit is happening.
A recent study, the ASCO study, the conference recently, suggests that the potential role in reducing the risk of at least 14 obese-related cancers. See, whether it's a pancreatic cancer, gallbladder cancer, ovarian cancer, endometrial cancer. So 14 obesity-related cancers was highlighted at the recently concluded ASCO conference. Talk us about this, sir. And how does it occur? Does it reduce inflammation in obesity?
Finally, inflammation, but that's one area of extreme interest, and developing science and the results of these trials are very exciting, because whenever we talk about obesity, we always forget about cancer. It's been known forever, the relationship of obesity and cancer, and by virtue of these things, we are more aware of the fact of preventive role. I get at Vedanta, even from the oncology department and all departments, people for weight reduction. And it's happening very recently with these new medications with their potency of weight loss. But yes, that's one area which is under study.
My last question. As Dr. Podar says that we have to celebrate Dr. NKG's birthday. My last question, Dr. Wazir. Where is Dr. Bhattacharya?
हाँ हाँ वो उनको नहीं छोड़ेंगे आपको नहीं छोड़ेंगे भाई
Sir, fat loss, muscle loss, bone loss. Tell us about these three. The conflicting studies regarding bone loss, but muscle loss and fat muscle only there. and more vitreous appetite as compared to the GLP-1. Talk about this. See, first muscle loss. We know fat loss. Talk about the muscle loss.
See, any anti-obesity medicine, be it bariatric surgery, even be it diet, so will be associated with some amount of muscle. So if you look into the DEXA or BMD to DEXA analysis, in the body composition analysis to DEXA, so what you will see that maybe 80-90% will be fat loss, but 10-20% will still be muscle loss.
More than that, sir, the recent studies published in presented at ADA 2025 that there is approximately 29 to 39% of muscle loss.
Muscle loss
With this drug,
totally agree that muscle loss is a part of any weight loss procedure, be it a medicine, be it lifestyle, be it diet, be it a surgery. So that will be there. So again, what Dr. Wazik told during his talk that you have to increase the protein intake, you have to increase the
aerobic exercise with high intake of
as well
protein
as
is the answer here.
not only aerobic exercise, you need to actually do weight.
Weightlifting.
So that has to be integrated into
What
that.
about the bone loss?
So bone loss will be, so again, that is
Conflicting data, some say it increases bone density, others say there is increased bone loss here. Talk about this. One last.
so again, this is an evolving area which is undergoing a lot of research. So adiposity itself has a negative effect on the bone. So if you are, so there is a cross connection between adiposity and bone metabolism. So adipose tissue, it causes a lot of inflammation, so increases the risk of osteoporosis. So the overall impact on the bone related to obesity will be less. So again, whenever you are losing weight and losing muscle, so again that will have a negative impact on the bone. So this is an evolving area which we all need to look out for. But this is an evolving concept which partly because of pioglitazone has come up and we keep on discussing it. But this nexus of between obesity and bone health. So apparently what we thought that, okay, if somebody is obese, he is protected from osteoporosis. But that is being challenged. So obesity, adipose tissues have a negative effect on the bone cells also.
Yes.
So that is something which is a totally grey area we need to look out for. So again, the coming studies which will come up will tell us.
Dr. Kalra sir.
I'm the last of the train.
Last
Very
batsman.
nice talk. Very nice and mesmerizing talk. I have already listened to Dr. Wazir on obesity. Today was again a repetition. Dr. Sapneshi, you said about desmopressin being the only peptide. Of course, it is the only successful peptide. Others have been tried. Even insulin was tried. And I can visualize in near future with SNAP-like technology, even insulin will be orally available and available on a pawn shop. And he will say, "I got pan Banaras wala lagana 120 number ki." So, what is your say?
So actually insulin and other peptides have been tried, but the key is the potency. So insulin is not a very potent molecule. So if you are trying to give insulin to snack, so this is like someday for say oral semaglutide, if theoretically 1%, so if you are giving 49 mg over the week or 50 mg over the week and you are thinking that dose is equivalent to be injectable 0.5, or if you are giving 14 mg and you are thinking that dose is going to be equivalent to 1 mg. So I will just clarify. So I am coming to your question. So even if someday, say, if 90% is getting, say instead of 1%, if 0.7% is getting absorbed, and other day, because of some reason, 1.3% is getting absorbed,
because it's a very potent molecule which the idea is to maintain a steady state, so it's not going to make a difference. For insulin, if you are giving it through snack, so it has already been tried, but if someday it's 70% and the other day is 130%, it's going to make a huge difference. So as of now, insulin through snack is not an answer.
Sir, my question was to just make it light and to fantasize. My last question is to say maybe in the time of previous we said that when diagnosed diabetes, we would 6 years. Maybe these days with better medicines like semaglutide, we gain more than 12 years when you are diagnosed diabetes and treated well.
I totally agree. So you have patients who are actually, so there is a concept of pharmacological remission. So somebody was on 3 medicines and you start something like oral semaglutide or one of the new